Welcome to the Drill Down, in-depth answers to oilfield questions. I'm Richard Spears.
And I'm John Spears. So Rich, I'm reading something the other day that caught my eye. It said that Dr. Spock, not Benjamin, but you know.
Oh, but the one with the
live
ears.
long and prosper.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Dr. Spock, that outcomes that he determined would be impossible actually happened about 80% of the time. So on Star Trek.
Oh, because he would go, Jim.
Yeah, right. There's no way that Scotty is qualified to run the starship. Yeah, right. That kind of thing.
So here's Spock.
Yes.
Who are all the nerds.
Yes. As rational as a guy can be. That was his thing.
He was wrong 80%
of the time. Now, as it turned out, the reason he was wrong is because he assumed that everybody else was going to be as rational as he.
But right Jim, the captain of the ship, he was anything but rational.
Right, absolutely.
He was irrational.
Irrational, surrounded by irrational. So the point being that if you're in the forecasting business, this actually illustrates a point that I would like to talk about today, which is that and we're all in the business of making forecasts, and this time of year for many folks in the oil patch, we're thinking about 2022 and trying to put together quarterly numbers for revenues and profits and rig activity.
Here we just ended 2020.
Yeah, not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So my point is, what error did Spock make? Well, he basically didn't. I think in the forecasting community they talk about he needed to update his priors. His assumption was that everybody else would be as rational as he was, and he was wrong. And he kept making that mistake. So he did not update his prior assumption.
There's two groups of people who think that Spock was right all the time. Yeah. Nerds and geeks.
So between the two, that's most folks, right?
so today, our podcast, I can tell now, is going to be for those people who might be nerds and might be geeks, but also have a little bit of Jim.
There you go. Right. Star Trek. So point is that, in making forecasts, one of the big things that helps get a forecast right is that you kind of avoid some common mistakes in the analytical process, right? And there's all kinds of...
there's like a gazillion there's mistakes you can make. Yeah. But I'm going to guess you've thought about it and you have a handful.
Well, I have a handful, but for those who want like an exhaustive list, there are those websites one can go to that sort of talk about this kind of thing. One of the ones that
how do I hunt for that? Well, what's my Google hunt search?
I'll give you a name. You can start with it's called Farnham Street. I think that's one that talks about Farnham. Farnam, Farnham Street. Marginal Revolution is another one, another website that addresses these issues of forecasting techniques, common mistakes, things of that nature. So just to pick a couple then that these guys talk about, one is, of course, I think what everybody in the oil patch would recognize is the mistake of a recency bias. What has just happened, we think it's going to keep happening, or that's what's going to be the case in the future, right?
You'll look out the window,
right?
You see that the price of oil is 65, and so you go, I think it's going to be 66.
Absolutely.
And you don't say 30 or 112.
Right. It's
that you look out the window,
pick the number, right?
And
absolutely, yeah. So that's a
common recency.
Thing. It's a recency, what they would refer to as recency.
Would that also be? I think of the famous state fair guessing challenge, which was guess the weight of the cow.
Right.
And it was an economic analysis to see if if people could guess the weight of a cow, if somebody before them guessed a particular weight. It's like none of us know
that.
Well, that's right. So it's like anchoring. So the first person walks up and says, "I think that cow weighs 1,800 pounds." Right. And I don't know diddly squat about the weight of a cow, but they go, I don't think it's 1,800. I'm going to go 1,750.
See,
the cow might weigh 1,000 pounds.
Okay. See, I thought you were going to talk about recency bias, meaning that someone had just recently picked up a cow, and they just thought that would be the weight of that cow.
If you pick the cow up every day after it's born.
So another kind of error that folks make is what is called motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning. And you think about it in the oil patch. For example, none of us who are working in the patch wants to see the oil business go away, right?
I don't, because I've got a few more years too.
Exactly, right. And so folks would like to think that, okay, it's going to continue on. Yes, there's all this discussion about energy transition issues and folks moving away from fossil fuels and making it harder to invest in field development, things like that. But so motivated reasoning would start with the assumption is, I really don't want the petroleum industry to go away, and then work backward from that, saying, for these reasons, I don't think it's going to go away.
In fact, it's not just that I don't want it to go away. I need it to grow.
Well, there you go.
So therefore, because it's going to grow.
Yeah, that hidden assumption. You don't even have to say I wanted it, but you just begin to say, well, this is, I believe that reason because it confirms what I really would like to see happen.
God, but if your original assumption is just wrong.
We'll see, and that's often the case here, right?
Well, okay, so let's think about, we've got European investors who a couple of years ago started approaching the oil and gas industry, and their assumption was, because the oil and gas industry is going away, everything else fell in line after that.
Right.
So they had their own
another example of just
motivated bias.
Exactly right. So so one of the things that I try and do is, of course, keep track of sort of how we forecast and what's turned out to get some sense of a track record, right?
Oh man, how have we done?
Well, on balance, we're okay, and I'd like to think we've gotten better over time. But the point within that is not just what's your track record, but like, keeping track of what do you know and how well do you know it. So that's really the
okay, say that one again. Yeah, my mind wandered.
What do you know and how well do you know it? So I'll give you an example. Right now, as I look at the macro environment, clearly the thing about oil demand is where are things going to settle with regard to COVID, right? Last week, the price of oil was $62 because people were worried about further economic shutdowns because of the Delta virus.
Right.
And this week, the price is back up to around $70 because people aren't worried about that anymore, right?
Hey, by the way, I don't know if you looked at Oklahoma where we live.
Yeah.
But the number of infections has actually turned down.
Yeah. So I've often thought that COVID-19 and the Delta variants would make a heck of a name for a band, right? But
the Delta, it's gonna be like Buckaroo Banzai.
But point being that if you're going to try and think, well, where will demand go globally, U.S., you name it, one of the things you have to think about is, well, what do you expect to happen with regard to COVID and the attendant impact that there might be on economic activity, right? And so now you have to begin to think, well, what's the efficacy of vaccines?
I got it. So you need you call the effect right, but how well do you call it? How much do you know about what's really going to happen?
Right. There's a whole series of things, some of which we may think we know pretty well. Some of those elements that are important to the forecast we may not know very well at all. And so that, I think, is the kind of thing we want to keep in mind as we bolt together a forecast of, in this case, for oil demand.
How well do you know it?
Yes. What do you know and how well do you think?
So I've got recency, I've got a motivated bias, and how well do you know stuff?
Yep, there you go. And so, for example, and the last one I'll talk about here is just what we call fundamental attribution error. So this is...
I can't even imagine.
So what that really refers to is you tend to overestimate how how consistent someone or a group's behavior might be. You tend to think that their behavior will be innate, and so they will continue to behave in this fashion forever and ever and ever. But in fact, most of the time that behavior is kind of situational. I'll give you an example. We thought that it was in the DNA of oil companies here in the U.S. to spend all their free cash flow on drilling new wells.
And a little bit more.
And a little bit more if they could, yes, absolutely. So,
and because that's how they behave.
That's exactly how we
forever, for a long time.
So our assumption was that this would continue to be the case forever. Unabated. And that investors would not push them to change their behavior. So all these kind of behaviors we just ran out into the forecast because we thought those were innate to the groups involved. When in fact,
boy, that ended.
That has changed, right? And it's changed because there's been this emphasis on focus on profitability. So profitability mindset, not volume growth mindset, things like that. So the situation has changed, and so the behavior has changed. And Now we run the risks of saying the new behavior will be what we see.
Well, and I think about, for the most of our professional career up until about 2010, our industry in the United States was defined by going after natural gas. And so there was a seasonality to natural gas that was both within a year, but within about a 2 or 3 or 4 year period, where I drill, oversupply, stop for a year, start all over again, this sawtooth approach to things. And then we switched to oil. Who knew?
Right. Didn't see that coming because we thought the reserves were long gone, right?
Yeah. And the world just changed because now we're an oil province, and we couldn't use the natural gas model that we use. So now we got to switch to oil. Yeah. And now we're switching again.
So some of those things are, maybe not affect activity or what you expect to see in the next year, but they're certainly come into play when you begin to think a little longer term, midterm, longer term, 5 years, 10 years down the road. What will people be doing? Where will things be settled? So just something to keep in mind as we all remember those famous words by Yogi Berra, which
what
is...
What did Yogi Berra say?
It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future, right? So,
that's actually the motto of Spears Associates. So we still get people to pay us.
So anyway, I think we'll come back to this discussion about, where do you find errors in forecasts, and how can you sort of rid yourself or minimize the likelihood of making some sort of own goals if you're talking about soccer, as it were. So,
is it time to bring up the thing that everybody's actually been waiting for us to talk about?
The puzzler from last week. Yeah. So hit us with what the puzzler was. Yeah. And tell us who.
Because we have a winner.
We have a winner. Yes.
Because a couple weeks ago we had a disastrous one. Yes. And we didn't have a winner. Right. I was not sure that the answer we had was the winner. But last week we posed the puzzler. Yes. Which was our buddy Dave was out watching a big field water containment tank being filled up by a water transfer company.
Sure, because you're going to frack a well. Right?
That's right. And the guy who was running the operation told our buddy Dave, he said, it's going to take me 60 days to fill this water containment pond. Yes. But I got a good crew because every day since we've started, we've been able to double the level of water in here. So like if the first day was 1 foot, the second day was 2 feet, the third day was 4 feet.
The question being then for the audience,
which was, on what day will it be half full?
There you go. Right. And now I got to tell you, I solved this problem the fun way with rubber boots and a hose and my above ground swimming pool there.
Did you? So, that's right, because you do have the above ground swimming pool.
I needed the rubber boots because you have to, drain the pool first, right?
That's right. I had a drawn to think about that.
And as I'm waiting for that to happen, I thought there's got to be an easier way to come up with an answer. So I think I have an answer, but tell me what the right one is.
You want the right answer? Because we had a lot of right answers.
Well, let's hear what.
But I have picked the first one that came in, and it's actually from our friend Grant DeFeer. Yes. Who works for Mammoth. Yes. And Grant's answer was correct. He says, I don't think he used the word "you idiot." but Grant said the correct answer, which is 59 days.
59 days.
Because if the water level is doubling every day, then on the 59th day, it's half full.
Oh, absolutely.
And the following day, it's all the way full.
So here's a point that I don't think anybody, offered. But if you put 1 gallon of water in that first day, okay, and now you're doubling that.
2 gallons of water.
Then 4 and 8.
4 gallons.
And so forth. Right. Okay. Yeah. So do you want to know how much water you end up with on the last day?
If you start with 1 gallon.
1 gallon of water. Yes. 525,000 cubic miles of water. So it turns out I didn't have a big enough above ground pool. Yep. So I might just say that, with apologies to Roy Scheider in the movie Jaws, you're going to need a bigger pond. So, anyway.
I'm so happy we did this one. Anyway, I encourage each of us to come back to next week when we'll record another podcast and deliver to our fans, our clients, our customers, a brand new puzzler. But until then, thanks for listening to The Drill Down. I'm Richard Spears.
And I'm John Spears.